Hello, you're watching Transbrations, and I'm your host, Nahshondion. Thanks for joining me. Today's special guest is Villarosa. She's a journalist and a contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine, where she covers race, inequality, and public health. A former executive editor of Essencemagazine, she is the author of the forthcoming book, Under the Skin, The Hidden Toll of Racism on American Lives and on the Health of Our Nation. Hello, Linda. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Who and what influenced your career goals?
My two biggest influencers were my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother came up from Mississippi to Chicago during the Great Migration with all of her brothers and sisters, and she started her own business. She ended up having several businesses and was a very respected and successful real estate agent, as well as being a psych. So she could read people's personalities and predict their future. My mother had a sort of a more straightforward path, but ended up being a hospital administrator, a social worker. She was a vice president of a bank. And then she quit it all to open the Human Experience bookstore, first in Denver and then in Harlem. And what I like about these two women in my family are that they started kind of late. Like each thing that happened to them. It's like, oh, I changed careers in my 40s, in my 50s. And my mother wrote a book in her 80s. So I love that they can have careers over time.
Did you play a role with your with the bookstore at the bookstore?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for asking that. That's a lovely question. I was a Black Studies minor. It was called Afro-American Studies when I was in college. And so I was coming home and telling my mother about all these amazing books by Black authors I was reading. And so she was reading them too, because I'd say, oh, try this book. This is Tonimorrison. Have you heard of her? This is The Bluest Eye. Have you heard of some of these other authors? And she was really on fire. So when she started the bookstore, it was really fun because I feel like I got her interested in Black literature because of my own studies. You
mentioned that your grandmother was a psychic, correct? Did she read your palms, or did she?
Well, in my family, what she did was she would have visions. And so she would have a vision that something was going to happen. And it was, I don't remember exactly all the visions. Most of hers were short term, but I do remember people in my family saying that I was going to be a writer. And they saw me in a house writing things, and that I would have this kind of career. And I always listened to that. And I was always excited by, that possibility, because that was a talent that I had early on.
And do you remember the first books that you were introduced to as a child?
I asked my mom that recently, and she's so funny. She's like, well, I just read the Dr. Seuss to you. And so she read kind of really basic stuff. But the point about her was that she read a lot. She was a big reader, and she believed in reading to her kids.
Your work requires a significant amount of reading, writing, research, and analysis. Which part of that do you enjoy the most?
The part I like is research. So I like to get in there and take a topic and do all the research I can, and then interview people and let them interview experts and let them explain things to me. And then I love to talk to people about their lived experience. Then I don't like writing very much. I find that really hard. And then I like having written, and I like seeing my articles out there, my books out there, but that middle part of writing is not that fun.
So what is the process of developing your stories?
So my stories start with a number. So I start with a number that makes me angry. So I remember in 2016, I'm reading the New York Times. And I remember the statistic that said, if nothing changes in society, half of all Black queer men will be living with HIV. I thought, why is that happening in their lifetimes? I was like, we know how to prevent HIV. Why are half of Black people living with HIV? And then I said, where is that happening? And I realized, oh, it's happening in the South. And it's like, where exactly is it worse? Jackson, Mississippi. Why would Jackson, Mississippi, sort of known for the movie The Help or Barbecue and the Blues, be the place? And so that intrigued me. So I looked into that, and I did research on that because of the number.
Wouldn't that be considered a conservative area?
Yeah, I was surprised. I was thinking the ground zero for HIV and Black queer people as men and men who have sex with men would be not Jackson, Mississippi, but Chicago or New York or San Francisco or something. So I was really shocked that it was a sort of a small city in the Deep South.
A small rural city. For over 2 decades, various communities have been educated and informed about HIV/AIDS prevention, treatment. There's PrEP. I believe PrEP has been around for about 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. Longer? Okay. And so, but the epidemic steadily continues, correct?
Yes. What I believe is that, I mean, PrEP is a good solution, but it is one solution, but it's not the answer. What we need to find is a cure for HIV/AIDS, period. And it's starting to feel like some of the energy has gone away from that because, and partially because we have another epidemic, another virus that we're fighting, which is COVID. So what happens with HIV/AIDS is it sinks into the places where people are already marginalized. So that's why you saw it. The beginning of the epidemic was in queer men, in, you know, people who are injecting drugs. It was in places where there was already marginalization, and that continues today. And you know, we're looking at solutions that have to do with, oh, people should just do better without looking at the healthcare in cities like Jackson, Mississippi, the, you know, job opportunities, the, you know, the infrastructure in places that, you know, all the systems are unequal. And so that's why you look at a place like Jackson, Mississippi. I remember when I was writing about it, my editor said, is there an LGBTQ center there? I was like, no, there's no LGBTQ center. There is barely a bus line there to get people back and forth to get for testing and treatment and things like that. That city, the infrastructure is lacking. And so that's where diseases like HIV/AIDS creep in.
I do remember reading the article. What was the title of it, Linda?
It was called America's Hidden HIV Epidemic. And a lot of people push back against the hidden part because it's not really hidden, because we knew about it. But I think it's fair to say that it was hidden to mainstream America, that people were surprised, like me, to find out that that was really ground zero for the epidemic.
What do medical professionals attribute the increase in numbers? You just mentioned economics and infrastructure. Anything else?
It was interesting. The person that was on the cover of the magazine is a really lovely person named Akila. And so I was talking to Akila and I said, you know, Akila had full-blown HIV and Akila came close to death pretty recently, like at a time when we have treatment. And I said, why, what happened to you? Like, there is treatment. Akila was in college, you know, when some of this happened. They said to me was, I felt unloved. So if we're looking for the solution of getting rid of HIV to be more medical treatment or more medical care, but the real answer may be, you know, the real problem may be stigma and stigmatization, not feeling loved and not having even the energy to take care of yourself, that's a different situation. As we wait for a cure, it's a different situation to say, it's simpler to say, we don't need more technology. We don't need necessarily more medication. We already have that stuff. We need some kind of love and care to connect people to the real technology and treatment and clinical innovation that we have.
It's more of a social and emotional issue.
It is.
And so AIDS was first recognized by the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention in 1981, and its cause, HIV infection, was identified in the early part of that decade. In 1985, you wrote the first reported article about AIDS on a Black female for Essence which is a Black publication. At that time, AIDS was called GRID. I don't remember what GRID stands for.
Gay-related immunodeficiency.
I've been honored to train journalists from around the world to better cover HIV and AIDS epidemic at international AIDS conferences in Barcelona, Bangkok, Toronto, Mexico City, Vienna, Melbourne, and Durban. Since you started covering the HIV/AIDS epidemic, how has the reporting evolved?
When I got assigned that first story, I think it was like a little bit later, like 1986, I think it ran in 1987. It ended up being the first reported story about HIV/AIDS, which was then called GRID, in an ethnic publication. I got assigned that story and it was a huge story. I was really young. I was kind of like just out of college. I was surprised to get that story, but I got it because so many other reporters or journalists turned it down because they were afraid of contacting AIDS from interviewing someone. I didn't know any better, and obviously that's not true. So I ended up interviewing a woman in the Bronx who was really ill. and she had gotten infected through having sex with her boyfriend, who was a drug injecting drug user. She had a little baby. She and the baby were, well, she was clearly very ill, and the baby had thrush in her mouth. By the time that story ran, the baby and the mother had died. So I did not know anything about the disease. And as the disease evolved and as society and science learned more about it, reporters learned more about it. So we were learning at the same time it was evolving, especially those of us who started reporting on it early on. The question for me was, when am I going to stop having to report on this? If I've started in something like 1986, I'm still reporting on it in 1996 when there is clearly a treatment for it in the form of the so-called cocktail that came in 1996. Then I'm still reporting on it in 2006, and I'm reporting on it for the Times and talking about Black death rates. Then I'm writing a cover story for the Times Magazine in 2016. When is this going to be over? That is the key question to me for someone who's been in it for a long time.
In 2018, you wrote an article for the New York Times Magazine on maternal and infant mortality, and it was titled, "Why America's Black Mothers and Babies Are in a Life and Death Crisis."
That was another story that started out with a number. So the number was the United States is, and this, I found this out in 2017. So I spent about a year reporting it. The number was, why is America the only wealthy country where the number of women who die or almost die in childbirth is increasing? Then why is there a racial disparity so that Black women in America are 3 to 4 times more likely to die or almost die than a white woman? So why that? And then why does education not help? So why is a Black woman with a master's degree or more likely to die or almost die than a white woman with an 8th grade education? So I set out to find the answer. I started with wanting to do a kind of a feel-good piece about how doulas, women, mostly women, but people who support birthing people, help them. And then I realized, oh no, my editor was like, no, I want to know, why is this happening? Why? This seems super unfair. What's going on? Why is someone like Serena Williams having almost having a near death crisis just trying to give birth? Why did I myself have a low birth weight baby when I was the editor, health editor of Essence? I was super healthy. I had a great doctor. Why would someone like me end up in a crisis with my baby who was born small enough to fit in the palm of my hand? So I was really interested in what is going on in America to Black women, about Black women, that is causing us to more often both almost die or die in childbirth, or have small babies, or have a baby perish in childbirth and labor.
And Serena, her situation, I believe she had an embolism.
She was in the hospital. She was in a hospital that she trusted. She was with her husband. They're both super rich. They had the best healthcare money could buy. There is no one in America who knows more about her body than Serena Williams, because she's an elite athlete. So why would she said she knew what was going on. She had had embolisms before. So she told the healthcare providers, this is what's going on with me, because she was having trouble breathing. And they dismissed her concern. Then she had a C-section to have her baby. She went home and the C-section stitches burst. So she had to go back to the hospital. She ended up having, her baby's fine. Her baby's super cute. I follow them on Instagram, but that shouldn't happen to her. If she's saying, I know what's going on, I know what you need to do, and the medical providers ignore her, then something is wrong with our healthcare system.
Race was a factor.
It turns out then when Black women, when we speak up, we're often not listened to. And that has been played out in medical research. That is just a fact, that not every time, but sometimes when we speak out and when we even try to do the right thing and be educated about our bodies and to take good care of ourselves, we're not listened to. And so you've probably heard the saying, they say, listen to Black women, listen to Black mothers. That has become a hashtag. Why do we need that? Obviously, you should listen to anybody in your healthcare system. You have to listen to us. We know our bodies better than you do.
And Serena, her situation, that ended up creating a national conversation.
That was an important national conversation. And I really applaud her for her courage in speaking out about it. She didn't have.
In November of 2018, you read an excerpt of your work in progress manuscript, at Performance Space in New York. You discussed your father's mistreatment in the hospital and how you and your mom forced the hospital to treat him with dignity, with the dignity that he deserved. Not just because he was a former bacteriologist or Marine, but it was because he was human.
That was very difficult. I was working at the New York Times newspaper, and I was living in New York. My dad and mom were in Denver, and my mom called me. I was pregnant, so I wasn't trying to get on a plane, and said, you have to come now, and you have to get really dressed up. I'm going to pick you up at the airport, and you put your New York Times business card in your pocket. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this? So I get on, she said, your dad is sick and he needs you here. So I went, she met me at the airport. My mom, remember, she's a former hospital administrator. So she was all dressed up too. So she said, your dad needs our help. They're treating him, and she said, like an N-word. So we went to the hospital. He was in bed, but restrained. He was a very beautiful dresser, his hair always impeccable, just a very kind of dignified person, but he was really upset. His hair was like all over the place. His gown was dirty. He was restrained to the bed. I leaned down to give him a hug and he said, get me out of here. So what we did, my mom went home, she got his medals and pictures of him before he was sick. So, in his regular clothes, we brought proof of his education. We brought his, medals from the military service, but that was ridiculous. And then things changed and we moved him to another hospital. But why did we have to do that? Yeah. Why is he not getting the respect that he deserves? Why do we have to show some kind of middle-class respectability rather than just get to treat this person who is under their care like a human being?
Exactly. And so what were you doing before the start of the pandemic?
So I teach at the City University of New York, and I was teaching at City College. I guess I had been running their journalism program. I was working on this book. So I had a lighter teaching schedule. I was working on a book, so about public health. So then the pandemic came, and I never went out that much anyway. I love working. I work at home a lot of the times when I'm not teaching. So my life changed little from, I was still at home. However, I became really in demand because we started seeing that there were racial health disparities in COVID itself, in hospitalizations for Black people and in death rates for Black people. And Black people got worse cases of COVID at younger ages. So if Black people were getting really ill at 50, white people were getting really ill at 60. So there was like a age disparity along with the Black-white disparity. So I became really in demand because people were trying to figure this out and understand it. I'm like, I'm no one in public health who has covered racial health disparities, and certainly who covered the HIV epidemic is at all surprised, but we are horrified that this is happening. So I started really doing a lot of Zooms. I started doing a lot of lectures. I started doing more writing as well.
This was March the 12th. Okay, in New York City, we're just short of quarantined. I'm getting lots of writing done, exercising outside, but want some entertainment, suggestions for binge watching: Succession, This Is Us, Unbelievable, Grey's Anatomy, Fleabag, Broadchurch, The Happy Place. Any ideas?
I read everything. I watched all those shows. I read a lot of books as well because you can't just work. I love fishing. It's like a weird thing that people sometimes don't know about me, but a fishing rod is 6 feet long. So you just stick it out and go get away, stay on the other end of this fishing rod. I live near Prospect Park in Brooklyn, so I could go running and do a nice, healthy outdoors exercise. I have a dog that I love to walk. And so I hate that we had a pandemic, but I wasn't, inconvenienced by it.
You don't go fishing in Prospect Park, do you?
No.
Oh.
I go upstate or to Maine or somewhere.
Oh, okay. You mentioned the fishing rod and then Prospect Park, and I didn't know.
Prospect Park. I've gone fishing there, but I didn't keep anything.
Oh, okay. And so you also had mentioned that you love Elynnharris and you miss him, and you're excited to celebrate his posthumous birthday. What books of his did you enjoy? Did you get a chance to meet him?
So here's my insane story. So I'm working at Essence in the 90s, and this guy starts calling me. He's like, he has a really heavy Southern accent. He's talking about his book, Invisible Life. So I'm like, okay, how did you get this number? Stop calling me. And he just said, I want you to read my book. I was like, I'm so busy. I have so many books to read. So I go to a conference in Atlanta. I'm at the hotel. There's a knock on the door, and there's this guy. He said, I'm Elynnharris. And so he introduces me. He is the most charming person ever. He hands me his book, which he's selling out of the back of his car, the trunk of his car. So I read the book, Invisible Life, which I love, love, love that book. And there was nothing like it. And, you know, in the early 90s, there was nothing like this. So each editor got to choose one book at Essence that was our favorite book of the year. And I chose Invisible Life, which was funny because he was selling it out of the, his trunk of his car. He ended up getting a mainstream book deal off of, and I hope it was partially because of my recommendation in Essence. Wow. And then at his book party in New York, which was super fun, he thanked me. And so I was really, his friend forever. I was so crushed when he passed away because he's such a beautiful, bright, light, generous person and really, really kind.
I've always heard nothing but positive and nice and sweet things about him. How false beliefs in physical racial difference still live in medicine today was an essay on medical myths, which was included in the New York Times 1619 Project in August of 2019 and was published in the 1619 Project book in November of 2021.
So remember, I'm mostly work at home. So I got a call from the New York Times Magazine where I'm a contributing writer. And they said, can you come in for a meeting about this project? And I said, no, because I'm like, I don't need to come in, just tell me what it is over the phone. And they said, no, we're having a meeting and Nikolehannahjones, who is a staff writer, is running the meeting. So most of the editors on the magazine, as wonderful it is, are white. And so I'm thinking, wow, Nicole's running the meeting. This is huge. So I go to the meeting and it's most of the Black people at the New York Times itself, it's all contributors. And Nicole lays out the idea. It started with her anchoring essay. And then she lays out the idea that we're taking over the magazine and doing this blowout about the 400th anniversary of the first enslaved person coming to America, which is 2019, happened in 1619. So each of us, based on our areas of expertise, got assigned a topic. Mine was medicine. So I was supposed to look at something that was grounded in slavery that happened to Black people that still exists today. And it had to have a through line. The first round of these essays, everyone did it wrong because most of us were not historians. So we're looking back at the horrors that happened to Black people during slavery. And, we knew some of them, but for me to go in depth about what happened, the experimentation, all the cruelty was harsh. And I just was trying to cover everything. So then we got sent back and they said, choose two things for my essay. My two things were, one, the false idea that Black people have super high pain tolerance, that we can endure amounts of pain much greater than any white person ever could. And this was justified by doctors and scientists at the time to say, oh, slavery is fine. It doesn't harm Black people because they can't feel it. We don't feel the whippings. They don't feel the pain of their children being taken away. They don't feel the pain of, working from sunup to sundown. So that was the first, false idea that was really pushed during slavery. The through line is in 2016, there was a study out of the University of Virginia that found that among 222 white medical students and interns, residents, doctors to be, a third or more of them believed at least one myth about Black people's bodies, including the idea that we have super high pain tolerance. So that was the first myth, and it's still existing today, The second was that, and it's kind of the flip side, that Black people have really low lung function. In other words, weak lungs that would be energized and strengthened through hard labor. So in other words, scientists and doctors were putting it in medical journals and saying, using research that was false, to say, oh, Black people need to be enslaved because it helps them. It makes their lungs stronger. Fast forward to today, and there's an instrument called a spirometer, which measures lung function. And so the crazy thing about the spirometer is it has a race correction. So if you are a Black person, it will correct to assume that your lungs are 10 to 15% lesser than a white person's would be. So why is that happening in 2016? Why are either of these things happening? So those were my myths that were grounded in slavery, but have a through line to today.
And the 1619 Project, the aim is to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative, correct?
Exactly. And it was, it was uncomfortable for people. And I think at first, we got a lot of celebration at the beginning, and it was really fun. And sometimes Nicole couldn't do all of the, radio and TV. So I ended up doing some of the Black radio, especially. The numbers of people who called to say thank you for the project, teachers, parents, school administrators, students. It was really, really beautiful. It was really fun. But then, the pushback started happening, and people started saying, why are you still talking about slavery? Because they missed the through line, which is that we're not talking about something that was limited to slavery. We're saying this exists today. There's still medical students who believe the false notion that Black people have high pain tolerance. There's still medical instruments that create an incorrect measurement of Black lung function. That is in today's world. And it's left over from slavery, but people just didn't want to hear. I say people, I'm saying white people did not want to hear these truths, and started saying that talking about this makes our children feel bad. So you can imagine, the pushback on that from Black people saying, well, how do you think we feel having our history erased, having our history not told in its full way? That is painful and unfair and cruel. Mm-hmm. So it's been interesting being part of it. I often get pushback anyway from physicians. I'm not a doctor. So when I talk about medical inequality, or I talk about racism in the healthcare system, people get defensive and angry. What I say is I believe doctors and other healthcare providers are heroes. I'm happy that we have them. I'm grateful that people go into the profession, but you can still have blind spots. You can still have a profession that in our institutions in America that are riddled with discrimination and racism. And if we ignore it and say it makes me feel bad, we don't solve the problems that our country clearly has.
And it sounds like from what you're telling me, relaying to me, is that they're not even aware of it.
They're not aware. And I don't think that it's on the surface. I don't think you say, I'm going to go to medical school and study medicine for 8 years just to be racist. You don't know. And what someone explained to me really made sense. It was like, in medicine, things are confusing. It's hard. Doctors and other healthcare providers work really long hours. There's many unknowns, especially during COVID. There's a pandemic that's killing people, and people, there wasn't enough PPE, protective equipment to protect people. There were a lot of things missing. It was very chaotic. Those are when your blind spots come out. Those are when you may start behaving in a discriminatory way toward someone who's not like you, whose experience you don't relate to. I don't think it's your fault, but it is your responsibility to try to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what did you think about the controversy, some of the pushback regarding the 1619 Project?
I thought it was annoying, but I just listened to what Nicole said. What she said is every time they burn one of the 1619 Project books, people buy like 10 more in retaliation. And so they can keep burning the books, but they can't stop this message from coming out. They can continue, they can try to prevent people from teaching the 1619 Project in schools, but they can't stop these ideas from coming forward and from people to have hunger to hear the ideas. So I just find it irritating, and it's a bad time in our country.
Do you know how many print runs it's had?
I don't remember, but a lot.
It sparked so much criticism and debate among prominent historians and political commentators that in November of 2020, President Trump established the 1776 Commission by executive order, organizing 18 conservative leaders to generate an opposing response to the 1619 Project, which was the 1776 report. It was released in January of 2021, and it was criticized for factual errors, incomplete or missing citations, and lack of academic rigor. The commission was terminated by Biden on January 20th of 2021.
There was absolutely no need for that. You don't need a 1776 commission, as the whole education system throughout its history has been about 1776. What we need is to understand that there could be a different perspective of when the country started based on the time when we got to America. We built wealth in America. We were the ones who, maintained the economic status quo in America for so long by working for no pay and under enslaved conditions. And that's ridiculous that there was a 1776 commission, and I'm glad it's gone.
Do you believe that the 1619 Project should be part of state curriculum for high school students?
I think what I really like is that the 1619 Project, there was a curriculum created by the Pulitzer Center. So some of the ideas in the 1619 Project and the book are too advanced for young kids, but there is a children's book and there's also a curriculum that is age appropriate. So I think those ideas are the ones that people are hungry for. They give a more complete narrative and history of our country, and that's what we want. We want truth. We don't want a so-called whitewash version of our history because it makes people feel bad. Get help if you feel bad, but don't try to push away the truth.
You also covered the toll that COVID-19 has taken on Black communities in America and the environmental justice movement in Philadelphia in 2020, and wrote about life expectancy in Chicago in 2021. How do you stay inspired and hopeful while at the same time writing about depressing content?
I don't find it depressing. I know maybe I'm missing a chip or something, but I find it, I have so much compassion for what's going on. And I think that if anything I write sparks any kind of change, then I've succeeded. I mean, that is the goal, to inform people, but also get people motivated by the work that I do. I really love it. Like I am kind of nerdy with numbers. And so when I hear those numbers around men with queer men with HIV, or I hear those numbers about birthing women and Black women dying in childbirth, I'm inspired to try to do something. I wrote about Chicago in 2020 because I found out my mother's community, where she was born and raised, Inglewood in Chicago, people lived to only age 60, where 9 miles north, people lived to age 90. Why in this day and age are people only living to average age of 60? And then I wanted to know, I wanted to understand what had happened to this community of, that was a promised land to people coming up from Mississippi, like my grandparents. And so that I get so energized by doing the research, doing the reporting, going to the places that I don't feel depressed. I also I'm really outdoorsy. I like fishing and hiking. I play soccer on my intergenerational non-binary recreational league, which is super fun in Brooklyn. And I take care of myself so that I don't get pulled down, so I can continue to do the important work that I really enjoy.
When you were doing the research for the story on Chicago in 2020, is that when you discovered that your mother went to school with Lorrainehansberry?
I already knew my mother went to school with Lorrainehansberry, but I did not know that it was Lorrainehansberry's father who first sued the city of Chicago for discriminatory housing practices. So I thought that was cool. So then that set the stage for her to write A Raisin in the Sun.
When the original project was expanded and published as a book last year, did the pandemic influence your essay? How much of the pandemic influenced your essay?
I was very excited because I felt a little bad. My essay was one of the shorter ones in the project, but now it's been expanded because my essay on medicine is the only place where the book mentions COVID-19. And so I included the story of Dr. Susan Moore. So she was a physician in Indiana who contracted COVID. So she went to the hospital. Remember, she's a physician. She goes in the hospital, she has a breathing tube in her nose, and she is asking for treatment and they're ignoring her. The hospital personnel is ignoring her. She was in real bad pain, so she asked for pain medication and she was denied it. And she said she was treated as though she were drug seeking, as though she were a drug addict. So she has the tubes in her nose. She makes a Facebook Live video. She makes a Facebook video, puts it up, that talks about her treatment, and she kept saying the refrain, "This is how Black people get killed." So she gets out of the hospital, she dies. So then the hospital does an investigation after her death, and one of the things that they found out was that the doctors, not the doctors, the hospital personnel, especially the nurses, were intimidated by her medical knowledge. And so that is part of the reason they were sort of afraid to treat her, or why they weren't listening to her. So for a Black woman, being more educated, being an actual physician, more knowledgeable than the people who were taking care of her, was a detriment. And I just kept thinking, this is how Black people get killed. Just like what she said.
That just doesn't make any sense. What their reason to ignore, that doesn't make any sense.
No, and it's true, because why would they ever admit it? You know what I mean? That's a hard admission to make. You wouldn't just say that. That's totally true, and probably worse.
And so we have organizations like White Coats. Their mission is to dismantle racism and accompanying systems of oppression and health, while simultaneously cultivating means for collective liberation that center the needs, priorities, and self-determination of Black people and other people of color, particularly those most marginalized in our communities. What role has White Coats, how do they factor into your research and your reporting and your storytelling?
I am really interested in that organization. It's called White Coats for Black Lives, and it's a group of medical students at 50 or more, I think it's more like 70 medical schools across the country they want to be doctors they're medical students who are going to be doctors, but they're social justice oriented. So they are the ones who are saying, we want to make sure our medical schools are giving us a full education that includes discussion of medical inequality and racial health disparities. We want to make sure that we are not learning about medical myths and pushing them forward. We want not to do that. And so they're very activist doctors. They had a few years ago, they had a die-in. And so then there they are in their white coats, and they're just lying in the street doing social justice protesting. And many of these medical students in this organization and other sort of activist medical student organizations were radicalized by the Black Lives Matter movement when they were in high school and college. Then when they got to medical school, they were already on fire about racial inequality. And so they brought that into their medical training and education.
I recently had surgery a year ago, and the staff told me that Black skin, darker skin, is thicker than white skin, Caucasian skin. Is that true or false?
That is so untrue. Black skin in itself, first of all, what is Black skin? Black people's skin comes in all colors and all thicknesses. White people's skin comes in different shades and thicknesses. So you can never make a blanket statement about that. That is one of those medical myths that may have been left over from enslavement. And in fact, in my essay in the 1619 Project, I wrote about a doctor who was experimenting on an enslaved man and burning his skin to see if Black skin was thicker than white skin. That was his test. He tortured this man. That was in the 1700s. Why is anyone in 2022 still believing that, or 2021? That's wrong. That is a myth.
I had never heard that before until going through that process, what I was doing. What inspired you to write your forthcoming book that's going to be released on June 14th, Under the Skin?
Coming out next Tuesday. So Under the Skin was inspired because I wrote all these New York Times stories, and they're really long, but they were really even longer because I love reporting. I do a lot of reporting. So when I'd write the story, I'd be going off on a little bit of a tangent here and there. And my editor would say to me, save it for the book. And I said, I'm not writing a book. And she said, you have enough for a book. Why don't you write a book? And so I started thinking, why don't I write a book? I also noticed that people like teachers and college professors and students were Xeroxing my stories and sending me notes like, oh, can I have permission to copy your story on maternal mortality, or story on HIV/AIDS or on pollution, because I want to hand it out to my class. Do I owe you $3, or do I owe you any money? I'm like, no, you can use it however you want. But then I thought, why are they having to go through this crazy process of Xeroxing, trying to get permission? Why don't I just do a book, pull it all together, coherently connect the ideas and the reporting I've done? So that's why I ended up doing this book. It's a year and a half late because it was supposed to be out last year, at the beginning of last year. But when the 1619 Project happened, I realized I have to do more reporting and I have to go back. And then when COVID happened, I was got pulled into reporting at the New York Times to report on COVID. And then I said, oh, I have to report on COVID in this book. So the last chapter of the book is about the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay. And some of the chapter titles are Everything I Thought Was Wrong, The Dangerous Myth That Black Bodies Are Different, Unequal Treatment, Something About Being Black is Bad for Your, what was the
your body.
Bad for Your Body?
Yeah.
Where You Live Matters, Strong, Loud, and Angry, The Invisibility of Black Emotional Pain, Discrimination and Ill Treatment Can Harm Everybody, and putting the care back in healthcare solutions. What would you say is the most important chapter for readers?
I think the most important chapter is the first chapter, because that's the most personal for me. It's the one where I go through my own trajectory and learning as a reporter reporting on Black health. And I say that at first, I only saw the world and racial health disparities, which have long been a problem in America, through a personal responsibility lens. And I thought, if every Black person does better, takes better care of themselves, eats right, exercises, does the right thing, goes to the doctor, we'll all be fine. And our healthcare will lift. So I was like, at Essence, trying to do all this good work and tell Black women what to do. That wasn't working because there was something else going on. But it took me a minute because I come from a race uplift family of strivers. And, we believe, oh, just pull yourselves up by your bootstraps.
You were younger. Did you ever think about working at Essence? Did you ever see yourself working there?
Oh, yes. That Essence magazine was on my mother's nightstand, on my grandmother's table in her fancy sitting room. So I really thought of working at Essence. I wrote them letters. That I worked at a place across the street from where Essence magazine was. So I was writing letters, I was calling, I was trying to run into editors so I could get a job there. And finally, I just wore them down. And I ended up first being a freelance writer and then becoming the health editor on staff. So it was long a dream. And I worked there many years, two different times.
Different times. How do you feel about seeing the editorial shift with them covering more stories regarding lesbians and trans people?
I am super glad that has shifted. And I feel like I'm part of that. In the early 90s, my mom and I wrote my own coming out story. I wrote about how I came out as a lesbian to her and how she didn't like it. Mm-hmm. She wrote about how she didn't like it, but how she got
it. This was in 1991.
Yes. And so that was a big story for us. And it was like one of the first times that that anybody, and definitely in Essence, had ever written that kind of in-depth stories. We had our photographs in there. So now when I see these stories about the LGBTQ stories, and certainly, some of the same editors are there, I think we've progressed, we've learned. I'm really happy about how the magazine has progressed. But Essence, truth be told, was always very progressive. On staff, we were very progressive. We were very unusual for a woman's magazine. The white women's magazines were not covering the same kind of topics that we were covering. They weren't covering HIV/AIDS early on like Essence was, because we had to deal with the problems in our community and try to help our readers to understand what they were about and how to solve them. So I feel really proud for working at Essence as long as I did.
It was one of my favorite magazines, and I started reading it when I was a teenager. So I want to read a few of the blurbs. Perhaps one of the most important and thought-provoking publications of the year, Oprah Daily. It will transform how you understand the relationship between race and medicine, one that makes clear the connection between our history and our health. Clint Smith, a New York Times bestselling author of How the Word is Passed. Linda Villarosa, one of our fiercest and most cutting-edge journalists, has given us a classic for the ages. Through engrossing stories of people's real experiences and her signature rigorous reporting, she reveals the biggest picture in American life, that racism has done us all in, and produced a nation so steeped in white supremacy mythology that we cannot take care of ourselves or each other. This book is a gift, a map, and a necessity, relevant for every reader who wants to understand their own time. Sarah Schulman, author of Let the Record Show. So those are just a couple of blurbs for your book. Over the past years, there's been tremendous talk about reparations. Some states and some cities are considering giving descendants of slaves reparations. Some cities have committees and exploring the topics too. In California, they just came out with a 500-page report, and the rest of that report is going to come out next year. And Gavin Newsom, the governor, he was the one who put that task force together. What is your opinion on reparations?
What I think about reparations is very interesting, because when people get into discussion about reparations, how to pay back the harm that's caused by, the years of enslavement and state-sanctioned discrimination to African descended people, they think, how are we going to figure out who to pay? That's the conflict. I will tell you who to pay. So my chapter on the Relf sisters, the two sisters who were sterilized against their will and without their consent of their parents, people like them deserve reparations. And this was recent. 2 states in the United States gave reparations to people who were sterilized under eugenics laws. So eugenics laws spelled out, and they existed in 32 states, who exactly could be sterilized, even if they were children. So now 2 states, Virginia and North Carolina, have paid reparations, a kind of reparations, to people who were sterilized and are still living. California, the one that's the most progressive, as you said, they're grappling with, in general, reparations for African descended people, is also giving out reparations, financial payment to people who were sterilized, even in California as recently as 10 years ago, mostly incarcerated women and Latin American women. But they are getting payment, tens of thousands of dollars, because their fertility was taken away. This is a way to repair. Most of the people who were sterilized in the United States under these eugenics laws, and even outside of the laws, like the Relk sisters, who I cover in my book, many of them are still living. They deserve something. I visited the Relf sisters. They are living in obscurity, in poverty. It's not fair. They deserve money for the loss of their fertility. That is reparations. That is what it is.
And what chapter is that in your book? What is the chapter of that title?
That is the dangerous myth that Black bodies are different.
The second chapter. Okay, the second chapter.
And it's excerpted this week in the New York Times magazine. It's the cover story of the magazine. It's the Relf sisters. They're still living. I met them. I'm friendly with them. I interviewed them.
Where is our society headed regarding health aspects of people of color if our humanity continues to be ignored, devalued, and dehumanized? And not just by non-Blacks, but by Blacks as well.
I think as far as, my jam is health and medicine. Where I do see those medical students who we talk to, like the ones who belong to White Coats for Black Lives, they are trying to make a difference. Those aren't all Black people. Those are people of all colors who were awakened first during Black Lives Matter and later during the tragic murder of George Floyd, and even during the COVID pandemic, to pay more attention to racial health disparities, to pay more attention to discrimination in the healthcare system. I think before the pandemic, especially, people were shy about saying anything about, the medical, our medical society, our medical societies, our medical system there's discrimination baked into it. Now, I see people saying there is a thing called racism that is a public health threat. Once we know better, we do better. So I think that knowing better, that more medical students care about this. They want to practice differently. More healthcare providers and health policymakers are admitting and discussing the idea that racism is a public health threat. This is new, and this is a good sign, because I think you cannot solve a problem until you know why the problem exists in the first place. So I feel optimistic, cautiously optimistic about changes I've seen in the past couple of years.
Another quote from Oprah Daily, it was the last sentence: Villarosa balances scathing expose with a cautious hope that we can re-engineer the healthcare system to make it more equitable.
I like that. I like that.
Back in February of 2022, you were working on a story about suicide in the African-American community, and you had said usually this kind of reporting doesn't get to you, but it's been a bad stretch saying the names of Mayor Kevin Ward, Chesley Christ. Did I say her name right?
Yeah.
Chesley Christ and Ian Alexander, and sending love to anyone who has lost someone. Over the past 2 decades, I've known several African-American men who've committed suicide. And have you ever lost anyone personally to suicide?
I have, and but even I have, and even more people who have attempted. And the kind of pain that takes is tragic and hard. And it just, I know during the pandemic, we were, sort of trying to make a point of asking people, are you okay? Mm-hmm. And I think that is even more important than ever. When I was reporting in Jackson, Mississippi, I was, seeing at the same time, I was seeing the Black queer people getting HIV for the first time or getting really sick from it. I was also seeing a lot of people that were talking about having suicidal ideation because they were sad and felt unloved. So if we have clearly a problem of mental illness and a lack of competent mental health care, especially for African Americans in this country. So we have to pay attention to this. And, I'm really alarmed by the spate of suicides. And the newest data, I'm still kind of working on that story someplace with all that I'm doing, is that Black young people take their lives or attempt at very young ages, like 10. And so if our young children are that, in hopeless, such crisis, we've got to pay attention.
Do you have any words of encouragement that you could share with the audience?
I just say that I think we have to really be careful about caring for each other and being kind. And I know people say that, and it's hard. It's hard when people are, life is hard right now. We're still having a pandemic. We still have these racial inequality. We have, there's wars going on. We have, shootings happening every day. We don't have gun control. And so I think we have to find pockets of hope and love with each other in communities. I got to know my neighbors much better during the pandemic by seeing them outside when we'd go out for walks or we'd see each other. And I made more of a point of it when I was, so busy rushing and working and, going back and forth. And I realized I need to kind of slow down and kind of talk to people more, check in with people, even if it's on the phone. I did, a lot of Zoom calls with my family. My daughter lives in New Orleans. And so we'd have Zoom calls with each other just to check in. And she said to me, "Mommy, you need to check in more." And I realized I need to slow down and just consider, how others are feeling. And, I think that was a good lesson for me and for many others during the pandemic.
Okay. And so what are you currently reading?
Oh, I'm really excited to show this book. This is called Take My Hand. And the author is Dolan Perkins Valdez. She wrote the book Wench. I don't know if Wench was a super interesting historical novel, and it's about enslaved women who would go with their enslavers, their masters, to free states and go like on a kind of a vacation. And she researched this and found out this was really happening. And then when the vacation was over, they'd have to go back and be enslaved. So this was a super interesting, quirky book. This book, Take My Hand, is about the Relf sisters. So she did research, the same kind of research I was doing around the Relf sisters and the lawyers and the social workers in the case she was doing. So she wrote a novel that is based on the same case. So it's called Take My Hand, and it's about 3 months old. I'm reading it now. And so I'm really excited by, sort of when my work intersects with even more creative people.
And so this is just one last question. Well, two more things. What does Audre Lorde represent for you and your family?
My family did a book with Dr. Gloria Joseph about the life and loves of Audre Lorde. So Dr. Joseph had never had her book published, and my family was trying to pull together this book publishing company a few years ago that was really for people who felt left out of mainstream publishing. And so we ended up publishing Dr. Joseph's book, and it was essays about Audre Lorde. For me, Audre, I met Audre not long before she passed away. And it was really beautiful. I really respected her. I loved, she made me think, she made me feel things. She always said like things that opened my mind. When she passed away, I became friends with her daughter, Beth, who's a physician. And Beth is a physician in upstate New York. And so after, when Dr. Joseph was living in St. Croix, when we started this book, so Beth took me to St. Croix, and that was where Dr. Joseph and Audre Lorde had lived together. So we ended up staying with Dr. Joseph, working on the book with her. And it was really a transformative experience. Audre, you could feel her spirit in that house, in this beautiful place. And, Audre Lorde was of Caribbean descent. And so it was really lovely to be there working on this book and just sort of soaking in her essence and her spirit.
And that book was titled?
The Wind is Spirit.
The Winded Spirit, The Life, Love, and Legacy of Audre Lorde.
Yeah.
And so your mother, the company that you just mentioned, your mother's reconnected with somebody in Denver and she's doing something. Do you want to mention that briefly?
So my mom is so busy. She's 91. So she started the Human Experience bookstore, and then she closed it. And then she moved to New York and started the Human Experience bookstore in Harlem. Then she retired. And so now the tattered cover was the other independent bookstore in Denver. So Human was the Black independent bookstore. The tattered cover was the white independent bookstore. The tattered cover is now Black owned. It still exists. My mother consults with them and does a monthly reading list for Black readers. And I'm very excited because in September, I'm going back home to Denver to do a reading at the tattered cover.
Oh, okay.
My mom's a good girl. I'm going to bring her with me.
Oh, you're going to try. Okay, that sounds really good. And so, Linda, what gets under your skin?
I think these racial inequalities really do. These health inequalities do get under my skin. That's why I keep doing what I'm doing. And I think that, it's hard to explain to people, and people push back against this idea that this really is more than skin deep. Being hurt by discrimination, by racial bias, by all kinds of bias, by marginalization harms you and gets under the skin and hurts your health. It's a wound. And so it's hard for people to believe that. They keep saying, oh, racism doesn't affect you. It's, you shouldn't let it bother you, or it's something of the past, but it does get under the skin. And that's why I came up with the title of this book, because it's real and it gets under my skin that it's so hard for people to understand it.
And can we see the book cover again? And I know I was reading somewhere, I think it was, I'm not sure which book it was, but your mother had mentioned, I guess there was a situation before you had asked your mother for input regarding one of your books and she told you about the book cover. What role did your mother have with this book cover?
So I was going back and forth with the publisher about the book cover. So I said, Mom, what are the key ingredients of a book cover that it really sells? I'm like the daughter of a bookseller. Mm-hmm. So she said, you got to make it bright. People like bright colors. Black people really like bright colors. I was like, bright colors. You're right. So then I was getting a lot of book covers from the publisher that were sort of looked like other Black book covers. So I was like, I want something unique. I don't want to look like Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, although I have great respect. I don't want to look like Heather McGhee's book, even though I have great respect. So I found this artist on Instagram whose name is Sean Gerard Clark. He is a New Orleans-based artist, and I loved this. And the part that I really loved was their skin here, but there's a wound here. There's some things that look like stitches on this person's face. This is a woman's face, but I wanted it to be less gendered because this book isn't only for Black women or for Black people. It's for all people, but it's not just a woman's book. Mm-hmm. I was over at my house and Jacqueline Woodson, my friend, the writer, was over, and I said, I really like this cover. I like this illustrator, but I don't like that you can really tell it's a woman. So she takes my phone and she goes, and she expanded it so that she made the face bigger. So it's not so obvious that it's a woman. Okay. But I really like the emphasis on the skin and on the paint on the skin. Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited because when I go to New Orleans on my book tour in 2 weeks, I will meet the artist for the first time. Oh, okay. And on June 14th, you'll be in Brooklyn. Jacqueline Woodson, she's hosting a book signing for you. Yes, we're having it at St. Anne's at 7:30 at St. Anne's in Brooklyn. If you go to my Facebook page, have a lot about it on there, and my friends are reposting it. So, anybody in New York at that time, please come. And the following Saturday, I'm not remembering the date, so it's Saturday, something like the 18th, I think. I'll be at the Schaumburg Literary Festival. Oh, really? Yeah, at 12:45 in conversation with Rebecca Carroll. Are these the first two events? Are these the first events for the book? These are the first events in New York. Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. So I'll definitely make it to one of those. Linda, thank you very much for joining me for TRANSBRATIONS. I never would have thought that I would be having an interview with the former editor of Essence Magazine. And I'm sure I read dozens of articles that you edited and probably wrote too. So this was a treat.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you for coming so well read, so, ready, prepared, and informed. And I really appreciate that because, some people just, you can tell that they haven't read anything and they're just asking you really basic questions. You are coming really ready to roll.
You
So
know,
thank
I went over this like a dozen times. You are the first reporter that I've never interviewed a reporter.
Yeah, you did a great job and I really appreciate this and you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you on the 14th.
Thank you. Take care.